Welcome to the Exchange Chambers podcast. We are an award-winning set of barristers chambers in Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds, with a proven track record in all major areas of law. In this podcast series, we aim to give you, the listener, an insight into life here at Chambers. We will cover topics such as pupillage applications, interview techniques, advocacy tips and more. We hope you find this and our future podcasts useful and enjoyable. Thank you for joining me on the third in this podcast series. Today, we are going to be talking about interviews and what we look for in an applicant. I am joined today by Pupillage Chairperson Stephen Connolly and Tom Farr, pupil due to start in March. Hi both. Can I ask you both to introduce yourselves? I'll go to Stephen first.
Thanks, Chantal. So my name's Stephen Connolly. I'm a business and property practitioner. I'm a former solicitor and I chair the Chambers Pupillage Committee. Now that committee has essentially two jobs. One is to be responsible for the pupillage recruitment process, and two is to be responsible for making recommendations to the Board of Chambers as to the offers that should be made for pupillage.
That's great, Stephen. Thanks very much. Tom, can I ask you just to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, Chantal. Hi, Stephen. My name's Tom. I am due to start a criminal pupillage in March 2023, so a matter of weeks away now, at Exchange Chambers in Manchester.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom. So welcome to all the listeners again, and thank you to both Stephen and Tom for joining me today. Today, we wanted to talk about interviews and how you can best prepare. We will also touch on the subject of what we here at Exchange are looking for in an applicant. I'm going to firstly go to Stephen, who's been involved in the pupillage process now for a good number of years. He's going to explain our sort of interview process to you all and also give us a few pointers on what you should and shouldn't do at interview. Stephen, are you okay?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chantal. So two parts to what I'm going to talk about. One is give you a brief overview of our interview process. And second is the so-called shoulds and should nots of interview. So a bit about our process. We have a first round set of interviews which last 25 minutes, and you have a panel of 3 people. We have a second round interview which lasts the whole day. And within that, there is an actual interview which lasts 30 to 40 minutes, and you have a panel generally of 4 people. Every candidate gets the same questions, and within the first round interview, each candidate is required to do a 5-minute oral presentation, and they'll be given a title and a subject matter in advance of the interviews. What's the purpose of the interviews? Well, it's to test the competencies against which we mark. And I know the competencies have been spoken about in the earlier podcasts, and I know that they're available on the website. But by way of reminder, they are intellectual aptitude, commitment, interpersonal skills, analytical thinking, communication, and judgment and integrity. So that's our interview process in a minute and a half. What about shoulds and should nots? Well, at a macro level, make sure you're on time. Sounds obvious, but I can think of a candidate pretty much every year who has failed to turn up on time. Wear a business suit. It's a business interview. And I can think of candidates over many years who come otherwise than in business attire. Now, there will be good reason for it on some occasions, and they will no doubt provide that reason. But remember, first impressions are tremendously important. So shoulds and should nots, 3 headline points: evidence, structure, delivery. What about evidence? Well, what we're looking for is evidence that the candidates meet the competencies. And what you should do, or my suggestion is what you should do, is start to plan now and get yourself together a note of your evidence as to how you meet each of those competencies. Point 2, keep some examples back from your application form, because remember, your panel will have read your application form and they'll be looking for something new, something that isn't repetitious of your application form. Thirdly, evidence, not assertion. Make sure you've got concrete evidence. Let me give you a very brief example. I am a very driven person, and therefore I satisfy the competency of commitment. That's pure assertion. I am a successful runner, and therefore I satisfy the competency of commitment. Slightly better. I have participated in competitive running since the age of 10, and that has involved me training 2 hours every morning, with the consequence that I've had to miss out on other opportunities. That's an evidence-based example. One other example, interpersonal skills. Don't get hung up on chambers being solely interested in your legal career, your legal interests. Some of the very best answers, particularly from an interpersonal skills point of view, are people who worked in customer services, be it IKEA, be it Tesco, be it wherever it may be. Remember, it's competencies and skills that we are looking for. Final point on evidence, don't over-egg. It doesn't reflect well, and generally it's pretty obvious. Second headline point, structure. Your automatic reaction at the start of any interview when you're nervous is to blurt out without structure. Avoid that. How do you avoid it? Firstly, take a big breath. Take a moment to think about the question. Ask for a moment. If necessary, ask for the question to be repeated and write it down. That gives you the time to think and to put some structure together. Don't pre-formulate your answer, but be prepared to provide your answer. And what I mean there is, for example, for each competency, perhaps write down 5 pieces of evidence that you might deploy. And when the question comes, and you'll be told what competency the question relates to, you can then scroll through that list of 5 and decide which you're going to deploy to your best advantage. Final piece on structure, practice, practice, practice. Whether it's with your friends, your peers, or it's through your inn, make sure that you're well practiced in advance of the interview. Final headline point, delivery. Calmness, perhaps more easily said than done. Body language, eye contact, smiling, pace. Get your rhythm right. Final point, do you need to ask a question at the end? No is the answer. Unless you've got something genuinely troubling you or genuinely you want clarifying, don't ask a question for the sake of it. So Chantal, that's a bit of a run through, slightly dominating the time, but I'll pause there.
That's really, really good, Stephen. Very, very useful, I'm sure, to everybody that's listening to this podcast. I'm going to take Tom back to his interview now, some couple of years ago now, isn't it, Tom? Obviously, we were during COVID time, so we were all online. Going back to your interview, is there anything now you look back on and think, I wish I had or hadn't said during it?
I think that there's a tendency when you come out of interviews to immediately think about all the things that you didn't say or that you did say that you could have said better. And for me, to sort of answer your question directly, and I don't do this, is I think that what I should have done is written down the questions I was asked and how I actually responded, because what it does, it gives you a tangible sort of reference point to understand how the conversations might have gone and how your answers might have come across. And And as I said, I didn't do that, and it's a habit I really should get into, because I find that the days that follow the interview, you forget everything that's been asked, and then you catastrophize the various elements that you can remember and think, oh, I wish I'd responded with a little bit more evidence with regards to this question, or wish I'd phrased it slightly differently. But I think that the thing that I would impress to anybody who's listening, and to anybody who is fortunate to be invited to an interview, is that the authenticity of your responses, and maybe Stephen and Chantal, you can attest to this as people who sit on the interview panels, but that authenticity where you respond in, I think, the most natural way that you can, is the thing that I would suggest to anybody who's listening. I think that really shows a comfortability in your answers and the things that you're talking about. That's not to say that you have to be so informal that you treat it as a meeting with friends, but if you're comfortable and if you're confident in what you're saying and how you respond to questions, I think that that's one of the most important things that can come across in response to any questions.
That's great, Tom. Thanks very much. Stephen, do you want to add anything to that before we move on?
I just say this, that Tom's interview, I think, was a Zoom interview, and Zoom is very much a different beast to face-to-face interviews. And but Tom's absolutely right that what you're essentially aiming to achieve, and you achieve this by practice by going to other interviews, or practice through interview training or interview practice, is you're aiming for a 25-minute conversation with your panel. You're aiming for engagement with your panel, and if you can achieve that, and it's no easy feat, but if you can achieve that, then your prospects of success will be so much the greater.
I think just on the issue of Zoom as well, and I don't actually know how this comes across as people sat on the other side of the interview panel, but I would always make a concerted effort to look into the camera, which is actually quite unnatural, because obviously you're drawn to people's faces. So now we're doing this and I'm looking at both of your faces, but to you, I imagine it looks like I'm looking slightly off screen. But I always thought, if I'm, I want to mimic the environment of a face-to-face interview as much as possible. So when responding, steady yourself and think about what you're going to say, and say it directly down the camera lens. If your interview is over Zoom, hopefully that's all subsided now anyway. But for anybody that does have that experience, it's something that I think it is an unnatural feeling. So it is worth practicing in advance if it's something that you might need to do.
And you need to quieten the voice that's telling you, God, he or she must think I'm an idiot. What a daft answer this is I'm giving, because rest assured, everybody has that voice, whether it's in an interview context or not, and the technique is to shut it off, and if you can do that, then you will perform well.
Yeah. I know obviously, sort of online Zoom interviews and face-to-face interviews are completely different, aren't they? But I am aware that some chambers are still holding Zoom interviews for first or second round. I mean, I think you'll probably agree with me, Stephen, is face-to-face is the best, isn't it? I think you get a bit more from the candidate. It's easy to engage with them, as I'm sure it is for them as well, to engage with the panel. So Tom, unfortunately, you had one of those years when we just couldn't do that.
Yeah, I know. I was gutted actually, because for me, I know this sounds almost masochistic, but the interview stage is the bit that I actually like. It's you can get into a room with people and you can do exactly what you said, Stephen. It's the body language, it's the face-to-face environment where you can immediately get a sense for what it might be like to work in that environment, and you can put your best self forward in a physical way, and you do lose some of that over Zoom. So I think that trying to counteract that is something that you have to be slightly aware of if you are doing a video interview. You're sat there in front of the screen, and this is one of the first things they teach you in advocacy classes: don't touch your face, don't wave your hand, don't gesticulate unless it's very, very specific and used to emphasize a point, or don't do it, don't shuffle your chair, that type of thing. So it's these little things that you have to factor in that you wouldn't normally do in a face-to-face interview, or hopefully not anyway. But yeah, as you say, it's a different beast entirely.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Chantal, that face to face is a much better medium, and you get a great deal more out of the candidates and from the candidates than you do from the screen.
Yeah, I mean, one of Chambers' main things as well, isn't it, is that we want people to feel as relaxed as possible. And I know that's difficult to hear and probably easier for me to say, but interviews are stressful times, no matter what job you're going for. Interviews are never easy, but we want you to be relaxed as possible. We want you to sort of, get a feel for the panel. The panel are all nice members of Chambers, not that we have any not so nice ones hidden anywhere, but these panels are people who give up their Saturdays and want to be there to get to know all of the candidates. So we want the best out of you. We don't ask any trick questions at interviews. They're all, questions about you as a person and to find out a little bit more about you as well. Stephen, before I move on, do you want to add anything else to interviews?
I just say it's for the pupillage process and for the committee, it's the best day and the best part of the process, because you get to meet for the first time a dozen really exciting people, a dozen new people who are massively keen or massively talented. And it's really sort of life or profession affirming. That's all I would add.
Yeah,
I think that comes across as well, having sat on the other side of it, is that this touches on what you were just talking about, Chantal, is the welcoming environment within the interview is something that even for me came across through the computer screen. And it's about making candidates, and we've spoken about this before, it's about making candidates feel as comfortable as they're able to be, to allow them to put their best foot forward in terms of what is effectively, it's an interview for them, but the people who are interviewing them want to make sure that they're also going to be the right fit for Chambers. And I think that does come across, as you mentioned, Stephen, the questions are asked of you very clearly in the interview. And for me, I had the option for every single question, would you like this repeated? Just to make sure that it had come across clearly, to make sure that I'd heard it properly and that I'd understood it. And it's little things like that, it's little touches that really do, in my experience, set Exchange aside in that regard, because interviews are stressful. Whatever job you're going for, it can be a stressful time, particularly pupillage. It's sort of revered, perhaps the wrong word, as one of the toughest job interview processes you can go through. So to make it more difficult or more stressful, personally, as I say, having been in the working world, both as an employer and as an employee, I personally don't see the benefit of putting people through the kind of overly onerous environment that just serves nothing other than to stress them out unnecessarily.
No. I mean, I love the interview process. And you think first round, we have up to 12 come in for each sort of area of law. So just nearly 50 applicants come in on the one day, and I'm on reception chatting to them, and I'm very conscious of the fact that they will be nervous going in for their interviews. So I take my sort of lead from them as to how much they want to talk and how much they just want to sort of collect their own thoughts. But it's actually nice meeting people and chatting to them, finding out, where they've been, where they're going, any other interviews even that they've got. So it's one of the best parts of my job, actually, is getting to see people come in and chatting to them. So it's always a nice couple of days.
The final point I'd just make, just picking up on something Tom said a moment ago, is the interviewees are also interviewing Chambers. They're also interviewing their panel, because invariably the people who we offer pupillage to get other offers, and we want to be their chambers of choice. And so we need to be seen to be the nice people that we are, the clever people that we are, the successful people that we are, because otherwise they won't choose us, and they will go elsewhere. And so it's important that the candidates see our true selves when they come for interview. And I think genuinely we show our true selves, because genuinely we are we are a nice set of chambers. We are nice people.
That definitely is something that I think it's pervasive outside of the four walls of chambers. You know, that it's one thing a chamber's saying, oh, we are nice, we are welcoming, but for other people I know who have experienced exchange chambers in one way or another, you know, whether it's the pupillage forum or the open days or anything like that, that has always been the consistent theme for me. That's always something I've been told, and you know, that's obviously my experience as well, but predating any direct interaction I had, it was always the experience that was passed on to me, that exchange is a leading set in that regard. You know, it is progressive, it is welcoming, it is a place where actually people want to go and work. And I think that's really important, just on a personal level. So I'm very excited.
Well, it'll soon be here, Tom. It'll soon be here. I mean, going along, you know, the staff route as well. I mean, I've been here 30 years this year, in June, you know, and a lot of the staff are all long-term people. So clearly something's being done right if we're here this long. So I'm just going to move on a little bit, if that's okay. And Stephen, I just wanted you, if you don't mind, just to have a little think and just to explain what you would say Chambers is looking for in a pupil.
Yeah, certainly. Let me start at a high and obvious level. It comes back to the competencies, and ultimately, whoever scores the highest in those competencies will be the successful candidate. Now, that doesn't really tell us much, however, about what we're looking for at a micro level for pupils. But I can perhaps do that by reference again to the competencies. So if we start with intellectual aptitude, strong academics are a given. And so we look for, well, what have you got beyond academics? Have you done mooting? Have you done public speaking? Have you got scholarships? Have you got publications? Have you overcome a setback? So have you got terrible GCSEs because you dossed around till you were 16, and at the age of 16 you thought, well, either pull my finger out now and get serious, or all is lost. That has a quality to it, a quality of, in part intellectual aptitude, but in part commitment as well. Coming to commitment, we talk about commitment to exchange, commitment to the North. Again, they're givens. What we're really interested in is concurrent commitments. Have you had to work to make ends meet? Have you got a particular sporting prowess that you've run alongside your academic work? You know, we have a successful candidate starting, I think, later this year or maybe early next year, who played cricket at county level, and she was fantastic in interview because she was able to demonstrate real leadership skills. Work for charity, that sort of thing, concurrent stuff, something to prick our interest. Analytical thinking, I've kind of talked about already, logic, structure, interpersonal skills. I'd make this primary point: there isn't an exchange chambers type. And you could test that by lining up, say, the last 5 years worth of pupils and asking them about themselves, looking at where they came from, looking at what they've done, looking at what their interests are. And the divergence is fantastic. We talk about broadness of mind, about the ability to relate to the widest cross-section of people. And in essence, there what we're saying is we're in a people business, we're in a service industry, and there must be the ability to relate to other people. And that kind of harks back to what I was saying about Aldi, about Tesco, about IKEA. Communication, we've touched on already, and be able to engage with the panel, be interesting, be dynamic. Most importantly, for me, and I think for the bar generally, is judgment and integrity. Because that's we're in the integrity business, we're in the trust business, the selflessness business, and you need to be able to paint the picture through evidence in your application form and in interview that you're an honest person, an upfront person, a trustworthy person, and a reliable person. And if you can do that, then you're going to score very, very highly with judgment and integrity. So that might be a slightly sort of waffly answer as to what we're looking for, but that I'm afraid is the best Chantal I can offer.
I think that's really helpful, Stephen. To be honest, I'm sure a lot of the people listening into this will find that really useful and helpful. I'm sure are taking notes as they're listening to you. I'm going to put Tom a little bit on the spot now, and I'm just going to, obviously he's due to start with us in March, and I'm just interested to find out, so Tom, what you're looking for most out of your pupillage, what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, that is putting me on the spot, Chantal. Thank you. No, genuinely, I'm really excited. So the past few years, I'm fortunate that I've had a career in law, the legal sector, for a few years, predating pupillage. Certainly when I started pupillage, but also predating when I applied for pupillage. So I used to work in the charity sector, overseeing the law reform arm of a charity focusing on human trafficking and sexual exploitation. So it was quite grim stuff, but the work that we were doing was predominantly based around making legislative amendment recommendations and putting forward policy proposals to bodies such as the UN, the Law Commission, the Home Office, things like that. And it was very rewarding in the sense that you spend a long time on a piece of work and you see it come to fruition, and then you present it to the relevant party, and then it goes off into the ether, and it either does or doesn't have an impact, or usually falls somewhere in between, in that it has a small impact, but maybe not necessarily the one you'd envisioned. But the downside of that type of work was that it's a big machine. It moves very, very slowly. So you can spend months on a piece of work, and then, as I say, you send it off and you can see maybe the impact in a few months or a year, maybe longer. I mean, one of the last things I was working on was a European Court of Human Rights case, and that's still not been heard. That's not going to be heard for another couple of years yet. So these things move very, very slowly. So to answer your question in a rather circuitous way, I'm very much looking forward to the immediacy of the work. You're in court, you're there, you're advocating on your feet, or in the first 6 months you're watching somebody advocate on their feet. It's that day-to-day interaction, meeting clients, meeting people, being out there, talking to the judiciary, talking to your opponents, other people at the bar. And I think that is always something that actually appealed to me even through the application process. I was thinking, I need this change now. I've spent a long time doing stuff that takes a long time. I want something that you can have an immediate impact. So I think that's the primary thing, really, is that immediacy, but all sorts of other things, small things. That I've been, working from home for many, many years now. I've been self-employed for many, many years prior to that. Even when I was working in a different industry, I was self-employed. So even just being out, going to the office every day is something that I'm really looking forward to, having a different structure, putting on a suit 5 days a week, which is something I've not done in quite a long time. So I'm looking forward to, buying a new collection of ties.
It will soon be here, Tom. It will soon be here. Not long to wait now. Just before I sort of wrap this podcast up, Stephen, is there anything you'd like to add to anybody listening today?
I perhaps just add this, that doing this podcast has kind of has reignited the excitement for this year's pupillage process, in the sense that the excitement normally starts to build when we've got our short list of candidates for interview, and we're going forward to the interview. But it's just reminded me what an exciting process it is, and what an exciting time it is, both for the individual candidates, but also for Chambers, because a great part of our growth is organic growth, and it starts with the interview process, and it starts with identifying outstanding, exceptional candidates to join us, and then you can kind of look. I said you could line up 5 years worth of pupils. You could actually line up 10 years worth of pupils, I suspect. And just look at where their careers are and how they've developed, because and this is coming back to the same point of us selling ourselves to candidates. You look at people who are now doing interviews and who are maybe 5 years call, and they're involved in some fantastic work. The biggest and the best work. And I know, because I listened to it the other day, Harriet, for example, was talking about the opportunities in crime, but those opportunities are equally available in my area, in business and property, in common law, and in family. So it's just a tremendously exciting time and experience.
Oh, that's brilliant, Stephen, and what a nice way to end as well. And it is exciting for Chambers and for us as well, isn't it? Right, okay, well, thank you both for joining me today. I hope everyone listening has got some really good pointers from this, and are all ready and set for their interviews now. So thank you both, and I'll see you both soon.
Thank you, Chantal.
Thanks, Chantal. Thanks, Tom.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
These podcasts, brought to you by Exchange Chambers, are offered only for general information and educational purposes.